Let me bring in Tammy Allison and David Bruno. And David, I'll start with you. This doesn't appear to be smoke and mirrors, at least at the moment. Now, oftentimes, and you were a prosecutor, and so were you, Tammy, on the federal level, prosecutors can overstate their case. They'll say they have this, that, and the other thing. They don't necessarily have it. But as we said earlier, they've got quite a bit in this case. They've got that audio that we talked about, perhaps showing him at the scene talking to his wife when he claims he was in the hospital with his father. We got blood spatter on Murdaugh's clothes. We got a GPS that says he was not where he says he was, that he was there instead of with his father. Text messages that suggest he was luring his wife to the scene. But let's say they have all that. That's a lot of evidence. This defense has, they claim that he's not guilty, and he said it emphatically. But boy, this evidence seems to be pretty strong.
I agree, especially in light of the 911 call. And there we have the defendant's statement, and the prosecutors, oh boy, do they love having a defendant's statement, either at that table in an interrogation with a detective or through this electronic 911 call that the defendant made. And he was very clear in the 911 call. I don't know what happened. I just walked upon this. I just found them like that, right? Which is going to be his biggest problem if that evidence is provable in a court of law. Because they cannot be true. They're mutually exclusive. You can't have it that you just found them there and then also have audio and video being at the scene with text messages, GPS, cell phone, cell towers putting you there. That's going to be his biggest problem. And the blood spatter, let me just talk about the blood spatter real quick, because you don't get blood spatter by transfer. You don't just walk into a crime scene, because that spatter is not considered spatter, it's transfer. And there's a very specific pattern to transfers versus blood spatter. And if his body was in the way of the blood coming out of the body, that is what the blood spatter is. That's another big problem in light of his 911 call that I just found them here.
Mm. Yeah, I was trying to think of scenarios where that could possibly happen. Maybe he tried to give mouth to mouth or something and it came under. But like you said, spatter is a very different thing. And there's a difference between what would have happened had he placed his hand and tried to help them, or if in fact it was splatter from him actually doing the killing. Tammy, when you talk about this particular case, one of the things that kind of confuses me is that the two victims here, the son and the wife, were killed with two different weapons. So I have to ask two questions. One, do you think this prosecution is going to have to come up with a real strong motive? Because we're talking about a wife and a son, but also they're going to have to explain those two different weapons being used to kill these two.
Yes, Michael, that's something that I was definitely paying attention to. The prosecution is going to have to come up with, how did he have two different weapons, and how was it that this one individual was able to successfully murder two different people with two different weapons? So I know we talk about how prosecutors overstate their case. A lot of times they overstate the case because they are extra confident that they are able to get a guilty conviction if the evidence is presented to a jury, despite defendants' attorneys raising any type of doubt. And in this case, I kind of feel like prosecutors, probably overstated their case to get him to enter into a plea agreement with them, perhaps. But it's going to be an uphill battle for them to explain that away with two different people, because whenever you're in a fight for your life, you're not going to stand there and wait your turn to be murdered by one person.
Exactly.
So I do think that it's going to have a very detailed explanation that the jury believes.
Absolutely, that's what I'm thinking. I'm saying if the son or whichever one watched the other be shot, they would be trying to get away and do whatever they had to do. Joe, I've got to ask you this question. You're embedded in that legal community out there. Is there any sense of what might have happened to Alex Murdaugh? Let's assume, I mean, he's alleged to have committed a lot of financial crimes and these murders as well, something else involving trying to kill himself so his son could get some insurance money. Is there any thoughts or ideas of what happened to this man and why he would have done any of the things that he's alleged to have done?
I know Alex Murdaugh. I know a lot of people that know him. I think everyone is mystified. His law partners certainly say they are mystified. The big question is, where did the money go and what did it go for? And there are some traditional things like gambling, drug habits, girlfriends, whatever. I don't think anyone today knows. We have receivers looking for the money. I don't think anybody that I've spoken with believes that he had the kind of drug problem that would suggest he spent millions of dollars on drugs to feed an addiction. In fact, most folks that I've spoken with say they saw no signs of an addiction, but it is a curiosity, and it's interesting that thus far the money went out and nobody knows where it went.
Yeah, it's incredible. There's so many questions that need to be answered, and perhaps the legal process can help us get some of those answers. All right, Joe McCullough, thank you again for joining me this evening. Appreciate it. We're going to keep tapping into you, man, because we love having you on the show. Thank you so much for being with us. Tammy and David, you're going to be sticking around. Now, when we come back...